What is Mimikyu? I've already done a video asking this question right here, but now it's time to go even deeper into the mysteries of Mimikyu. So let's go and do a quick recap of the last video because we explored why Mimikyu could potentially hate Pikachu so much, and then we ended up going into the entire history of Pokemon almost. That Pokemon have existed for thousands and thousands of years, and even longer than that, so we can establish that in the Pokemon world, that Pokemon like Mimikyu, Pokemon like Pikachu, Pokemon have existed for a very long time, which is why it's really interesting when we look at the entry for Mimikyu, that around 20 years ago is when Mimikyu started appearing with this Pikachu form to kind of mimic the merchandise that Pikachu has had, even though both Pikachu and Mimikyu have existed for much longer than just 20 years ago. So it wore some kind of other costume, some kind of other form that we have not looked into very much, but at the same time, this ended up debunking the Porygon theory, because Porygon is at most 20 years old, or around 20 years ago is when Porygon was developed. So there's really no way that Mimikyu is a Porygon spirit that is trying to avenge itself for getting banned by giving kids seizures in that Japanese Pokemon episode. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. But also, this unlocked a couple of other things for the theory, which is why we're in part 2 right now. Because when I was coming up with ideas for the video, I was thinking about the first episode of the Pokemon anime at the end where Pikachu unleashes that insane supercharged Thunderbolt and then goes and nukes a ton of Spearow. Like, look at that right there. That is pure energy. And there was a couple of Spearow there that got point blanks. Like, whatever Spearow was there, that thing has to be dead, especially when you consider that the amount of energy that Pikachu let off was almost enough to kill Pikachu. So that could mean that something might have died there, and then that's why I wanted this theory to start, you know, snowball like, yo, what if one of the Spearow died, and that's why it became a Mimikyu and then hates Pikachu so much. But then we're getting into the same realm as the Porygon right there, that, okay, the episode was 20 years ago, and Mimikyu existed before then, and Pikachu existed before then, so there's really no reason for it to specifically be that Spearow, even though we know that these are vengeful mofos right here, that it even goes into Palette Party Panic. And then there's even that Fearow that remembers what happened at the first episode, and then, you know, there's all kinds of craziness that ends up going down because of it, but it doesn't seem like that's going to really go anywhere. However, it does lead to the next part, because if we want to understand Mimikyu, then we have to understand ghosts. Because, yeah, things die and they possess things, and those possessed things could potentially become Pokemon. So the ghost typing is really weird. Like, in the real world, ghosts are these things that may or may not exist, and people are skeptical, and it's kind of a strange thing. People believe, people don't. Some things get possessed. Who knows what's going to happen when it comes down to ghosts? But in the Pokemon world, there's no question. They are absolutely real, because, yeah, you see a Ghastly floating around. Well, that's a ghost. You see Pokemon go and possess things like a Rotom. Only ghost-like things can do that. So ghosts are very much real in the Pokemon world, and they're just kind of accepted like that. And even the Pokedex entries start getting really creepy when we break it down, like Phantump. According to old tales, these Pokemon are stumps possessed by the spirits of children who died while lost in the forest. And I specifically found that picture from the anime on Bulbapedia because, yeah, those are just happy dead children right there that have become Pokemon. So it's a possessed stump. And that just kind of shows how commonplace it is in Pokemon with ghosts. I was looking into other ghost type Pokemon. Litwick shines with a light that absorbs the life energy of people and Pokemon, which become the fuel that it burns. And also Pumpkaboo. It's said to carry wandering spirits to the place where they belong so they can move on. The pumpkin body is inhabited by a spirit trapped in this world. So kind of showing that spirits and ghosts and all kinds of crazy stuff happen. Not to mention that Pokemon dying is also very commonplace because there's actual Pokemon cemeteries. That these aren't for people, these are for Pokemon right here, and you can even see trainers mourning their lost Pokemon and even battling over their grave, which is kind of messed up right there. So yeah, ghosts are kind of a big deal in the Pokemon world, and we can go back to Mimikyu with this and look more into its lore. Its health fails when bathed in the rays of the sun, so it prefers to stick to dark places. Now, as we've already talked about, Mimikyu isn't the Pikachu-looking thing. It's the black shadow that lives inside of that costume, and also shows that Mimikyu can live outside that shadow just fine. That as long as it stays out of the sun, it'll be okay, so it's just this amorphous shadow ghost kind of Pokemon. And I guess one way of thinking about it is like a bedsheet ghost. You know, Halloween costume, that's all that Mimikyu really is. So before the Pikachu merchandise, it might have had some kind of other covering that wasn't as elaborate, because now it's just trying to fit in and look like Pikachu. And now the big question is, why Pikachu? We've already looked into what Mimikyu isn't, and we've already looked into what ghost Pokemon are, so the next step is trying to figure out what would be so resentful of a Pikachu, and there's actually a group of Pokemon for that. We have the Pika clones. I mean, think about how disrespectful that is right there, that these are individual Pokemon. I just kind of lumped them together as Pika clones. I'm just acknowledging them as knockoff Pikachu. That you see Pikachu has already been more established. You look at these other Pokemon, it's like, well, they're just electric rodents. That doesn't really mean much of anything, except when we're looking into what Mimikyu could be, because Mimikyu also learns Thunder and Thunderbolt via TM. So that means potentially in its past life, it retained these memories, or it retained some kind of ability to use electric type attacks, which kind of strengthens what it could be for a Pika clone. But then it gets a little deeper, because Mimikyu is not just a ghost type Pokemon, it is a ghost fairy typing, and there's actually a Pika clone, Dedenne, that is a fairy typing as well. Now this is kind of like the easy ones, like, alright, you know, Mimikyu hates Pikachu, Pika clones feel bad that they're not Pikachu, and Dedenne is fairy, therefore Mimikyu. But it's actually a little more than that, because Dedenne is a tiny little mouse, and it's only 8 inches tall. Well, Mimikyu, its Shadow, the actual Mimikyu Pokemon, is only 8 inches as well. So this could maybe be enough, that we have fairy typing, we have electric type attacks, that, you know, we drop that electric for ghost, and then next thing we know, boom, we have Dedenne being pissed off, and then also becoming a Mimikyu, or also maybe just all Pokemon, that Mimikyu has some kind of feelings to it, you know, that it wants to be loved by people, that's kind of an outcasted Pokemon because it has to live in the shadows, and it does want attention, it does want affection, so maybe that's where that fairy typing comes from, and not necessarily just from a Dedenne, but all Pika clones. So what do you think? Do you think it's possible that Dedenne or the Pika clones are what causes Mimikyu to dress up like this? Now think about it, it was 20 years ago when Mimikyu started appearing like this, as Pikachu merchandise took off. So that's when it was really cemented that all of the other electric rodents, they're just Pika clones. They're not as good as Pikachu. They'll never live up to it. So that's when a Pika clone dies and then just becomes vengeful and wants to come back as a Mimikyu. Or maybe it's just not that complex either. Let's look at a Pokemon like Bayonet. Now, when I say Bayonet, for some reason when I googled it, you know, Bayonet Mimikyu actually brings up some results, and people are making theories about Bayonet and Mimikyu being the same thing. Now, I think that these theories are just dumb, because Bayonet is already a Pokemon. Bayonet is already Bayonet, but I'm looking at Bayonet for a different reason, because its Pokedex entry is very strange. A cursed energy permeated the stuffing of a discarded and forgotten plush doll, giving it new life as Bayonet. The Pokemon's energy would escape if it was ever to open its mouth. An abandoned plush doll becomes this Pokemon. So Bayonet's a second stage Pokemon. Like, Bayonet is the evolved form of Shuppet, but it can just kind of come into being. It can just kind of exist as a Bayonet. But maybe it's Bayonet that sheds the most light onto what ghost-type Pokemon actually are. You know, kid throws away doll, doll becomes Bayonet. That's all there is to it. Just bad voodoo and energy and grudging emotions create ghost-type Pokemon for no reason. And some of these Pokemon sound downright evil. Haunter licks you, and then you die. That's literally the Pokedex entry. We have Gourgeist that sings and curses you. We have Drifblim that wants to drag you down into hell. So maybe that kind of gives an idea of what's going on with Mimikyu. That it has anger, has hatred towards Pikachu, and maybe the answer is a lot simpler because of ghost-type Pokemon. That maybe a Mimikyu is just a fallen victim of any Pikachu. That whenever something dies at a Pikachu's hands, because Pikachu is a dangerous Pokemon, it's dealing with pure electricity. We know that Pokemon die, we know that ghosts are dead Pokemon or dead people or dead whatever, and because of that, if Mimikyu kills something, maybe if there's the right amount of anger, maybe if there's the right amount of bad emotions towards that Pikachu, it is something that can become a Mimikyu. So it does take the thoughts of the Porygon and the Spearow or any of these other crazy theories going around, but maybe what really set off Mimikyu was that it sees Pikachu becoming popular. 20 years ago is when Pikachu merchandise started getting really popular. Mimikyu was okay, you know, it came back, it was just kind of a lost little soul, it wanted to try to get by, maybe have someone care for it again, because it was once a Pokemon, it once had a trainer, and just wants to be loved again, but then it sees that Pikachu now becomes the most popular thing ever. And that's why that Mimikyu would have so much anger behind it. But even then, like, what about any Pokemon that's died? Why doesn't every Pokemon come back as a Mimikyu? And why specifically Pikachu and hatred towards Pikachu? Honestly, who knows? Maybe there's something special about a Pikachu's electric attack when they're put into a fatal state from the blow. Or maybe we can just kind of keep dialing this one back even more. We've already shown how weird ghost-type Pokemon are, because while they are evil, or while they are really strange and malicious, not all of them come off that way. Some of them just like playing tricks on you. Other ones you can actually befriend and use them very powerfully in battle. So it's all kind of up to the whim of the Pokemon and whatever energies are working around it. That sometimes they can be bad, sometimes they can be good, and then we don't really question all the other ghost Pokemon. That's some of the entries, like for Yamask, it's like, okay, this is how this Pokemon exists, but what about Drifblim? Drifblim exists. We don't know, like, how does a balloon become possessed and then become evil enough to want to drag you into the underworld? Where do all of these other ghost-type Pokemon come from? Ghastly is just a ball of gas, you know? Spirits in Pokemon be spirits in Pokemon. As to why Mimikyu hates Pikachu, maybe we'll never know. Maybe the anime will give us a bit more insight. As to something directly related to Pikachu, might not seem that way. Maybe it's also just that Mimikyu, it's sad, you know? It's sad that it was taken from the world and now it's just a ghostly Pokemon and it can't be out in the light or else it gets hurt, so that way it can't interact with people again. I think that what I said just a couple minutes ago about how it still wants to be trained, it still wants to have affection and care, maybe that's where that fairy typing comes into play. Maybe Mimikyu just wants to feel special again, and then seeing the most popular Pokemon fills it with anger, fills it with hatred, really fulfills that dark side of the ghost typing, because when you think about it, we don't try to justify any of the other ghost Pokemon's existences. Damn it.